Welcome back to Dental Practice Masters. If you're just tuning in, we're a dental practice management advising company that at this time is dedicated to helping practices get through the COVID-19 outbreak. Before we begin, we have two disclosures. First, the situation is very dynamic. As such, the information becomes outdated incredibly quickly. As a result, you'll see a date at all of our videos at this time. Second, we're not an HR company, accountants, or attorneys, so none of this information represents anything other than the sharing of some information in an attempt to help in an environment when information is everywhere, but nowhere in particular. We're working side by side with Swindle, Bone, Durden, and Phillips, a certified CPA and business advisors. They should be thanked for a great deal of this information as it takes a considerable effort to stay on top of it. All dental practice owners, if your accountant is not fantastic, you now have some free time to call them. Today we're going to be digging into some financial aspects of this catastrophe. First, let's talk about federal income tax filing and payments. The IRS issued Notice 2020-17, which postponed the due date of federal income tax payments from April 15th, 2020 to July 15th, 2020. The IRS then issued Notice 2020-18, which supersedes, restates, and expands on the prior notice. The April 15th due date for filing tax returns and for payment of the tax is automatically postponed to July 15th. Taxpayers do not have to sign or file extension forms. This is automatic. There is no limitation on the amount of the payment that may be postponed. Relief applies to 2020 first quarter estimated tax payments due April 15th. Currently, the relief does not apply to second quarter estimated tax due June 15th. We await technical clarification on whether the relief applies to the April 15th due date for making IRA and HSA contributions. And for more information comes out on these things, we will be certainly passing it along. Next, let's talk about some business action items. We encourage everyone to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. By now, you either have been forced to close your business, anticipate a closure soon, or expect operations will be severely curtailed. On March 23rd, Pennsylvania was closed down from doing any dentistry, including emergencies, unless that practice has many infection controls in place, including negative pressure isolation rooms with HEPA filtration. Although you're likely not in PA when you're watching this, the fact remains that we need to be prepared for mandates like this to be enforced. Next, staffing issues. Employees are our most valuable asset. We also love them and care about them deeply and want the best for them. None of us want to abandon our team during this temporary situation. This situation calls for us to evaluate staffing needs and act accordingly regarding the extremely hard decision of termination or temporary layoff. We're currently forced to make decisions at warp speed without sufficient details. Due to the uncertainty and lack of details available regarding possible exemptions for businesses with fewer than 50 employees in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which we will discuss, we're unable to make a recommendation regarding the possible strategy of laying employees off prior to April 2nd in order to avoid the challenges with the act if there ultimately is no exemption. We may or may not be exempt. Businesses would receive 100% credit for paid leave pursuant to the act. However, there may be a cash flow timing difference between the payment of the paid leave and the receipt of your credit or refund. Depending on your personnel policies, in most instances, if team members have earned vacation, sick leave, or other paid time off, you will pay this benefit until exhausted if the employee elects to use the PTO now. Once PTO is exhausted, you must decide if your working capital is sufficient to continue paying key team members a portion or a percentage of their wages by allowing the PTO account to go negative or by making pay advances to them, which will be repaid from future wages after we ultimately survive this crisis. You should not only be considered by financially strong practices or businesses and only for key employees. Now, they all may be key to you. If you decide to make advances against future pay, then this may be considered a loan, not wages, and is not subject to payroll taxes until they resume work in the future. The loan will be repaid from taxable wages at that time over agreed upon time frame. Now, we're talking about the specifics as it stands today with employment law, legalities, and such. But first, we want to offer one way for you to think about this entire topic. The best possible thing you can do for your team is to do all you can do to ensure that they have a practice to come back to after this is over. All of this that we are thinking about here should be viewed through that lens. Unfortunately, this will lead to some difficult decisions in the short term. We do not know how long this will last, and for all we know, the shutdown of dental practices may end up being more aggressive than it actually is right now. Temporarily laid off or terminated employees can apply for unemployment benefits and should do so immediately. Delays likely can be mitigated if they do this as soon as possible. For practices or business that use payroll services, please notify the service of the staff members that they have been temporarily laid off and those that have been terminated, if any. Next, let's talk about overhead and cash flow issues. We encourage you to evaluate current working capital, cash, accounts receivable, accounts payable, as well as debt service requirements to develop a proper 90-day cash flow plan. Eliminate all non-essential expenses immediately. We will only maintain needs and not wants. If you can't eliminate an expense, then work to reduce it. If you use QuickBooks and have been using it properly, under the Reports section you can find the report Profit and Loss Detail. This will detail every expense in whatever time period you want to choose. It is simple then to make a list of what is a necessary expense, what needs to be eliminated immediately, and others that you will need to make a decision on. You can easily determine what your payroll will be over the coming weeks as well. A simple spreadsheet will provide you with all the decent idea of your expenses over the coming weeks and months. From this, you'll be able to make a much more educated decision on how long you can survive and what your available working capital will be depending on how long this layoff lasts. You should continue to work on collecting receivables from patients and insurance companies. Call your vendors and suppliers to discuss extended payment terms. Communication is key. Be proactive. Call your insurance agent about the provisions of your business interruption insurance policy. If you do not own your building, contact your landlord to request a deferral of rent until normal operations resume. All foregone rent could be prorated over the remaining term of the lease. Consider reducing or stopping retirement plan contributions until operations can resume. If you have sufficient personal cash reserves for household living expenses, then stop taking payroll from the practice or business in order to reduce the current cash flow requirements for payroll taxes. If you do not have sufficient personal cash reserves or for household living expenses, then take distributions instead of payroll to reduce payroll tax cash flow. We'll catch up or adjust accordingly after the dust settles. Contact your bank immediately to require a request for deferral of loan payments or convert loans to interest only until full operations resume. Make the same request regarding the practice or business real estate loans. Consider requesting your bank to establish a working capital line of credit or increase an existing one. Increasing the existing is the quickest way to obtain more working capital and often will not require for you to be a personal guarantor. Do understand that with many new lines of credit, you may be required to be a personal guarantor. If your practice acquisition debt is outside the prepayment penalty, consider refinancing at a longer term to reduce the monthly payment. After the crisis, you could accelerate the payment of principal with a properly structured loan to allow additional payments of principal without triggering a prepayment penalty on the new loan. You could even refinance the acquisition debt to pull cash out to weather the storm. Bank lending rates are around 3.5% and they are lending. The U.S. Small Business Administration is offering a low-interest federal disaster loans for working capital for small businesses suffering substantial economic injury as a result of the coronavirus. The loans offer up to $2 million in assistance with long-term repayments of 30 years. Terms are determined on a case-by-case basis depending on the borrower's ability to repay. The interest rate is 3.75 for small businesses, but could be higher, up to 7%. If it is deemed the business has the ability to borrow from a traditional lending source. If you have an existing lender, it may require refinancing of the existing loan. You can apply at the web address we have listed below. Access sources of cash for emergencies in the following order. Home equity line of credit. If you do not have one, consider establishing one now. Line of credit secured by your personal investment portfolio. If you do not have one, consider establishing one now. Practice or business line of credit. Zero interest rate credit cards. Sale of investments. Sell bonds which have increased in value while this has happened, while stocks have declined. Do not sell stocks unless you have to. Health savings account. Roth IRAs, loans from retirement plan, a last resort. Traditional IRA with rollover in less than 60 days, a last resort. Credit cards with interest, absolute last resort. So let's talk about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which goes into effect no later than April 2nd, 2020 and expires December 31st, 2020, responds to the coronavirus outbreak by providing additional assistance in the areas of COVID-19 testing, sick leave, food assistance, and more. Now, we've compiled a key list of details of this act that we believe you need to know. The Secretary of Labor may exempt small businesses with fewer than 50 employees from the requirements of providing this leave when the imposition of such requirements would jeopardize the viability of the business. However, we wait for clarification on how and when to apply for exemption. Employers with less than 25 employees may be relieved of the requirement of restoration of the employee's position if certain conditions are met. However, we await for clarification on details and conditions. In summary, this is what the Act does. It requires private insurance plans to provide free COVID-19 testing, requires employers to provide emergency paid sick leave to workers affected by COVID-19, and expands the Family Leave and Medical Leave Act. Offers increased funding for state unemployment insurance, food stamp, and nutritional programs. More specifically, here's what the Families First Coronavirus Response Act means to both business owners and employees in the areas of sick leave and expanded family medical leave. Employees are eligible for up to 2 weeks of sick leave, full pay for self, 2/3 of pay for family care. For illness, quarantine, or school closures. Employees are eligible for up to 12 weeks of FMLA leave for school closures, 10 days unpaid, and then up to 10 weeks at 2/3 of the pay. The FMLA expansion covers employers with fewer than 500 employees, employees who have been employed for at least 30 calendar days, some exclusions may apply. Employees must care for children under the age of 18 in the event of school and place of care closures, or if care provider is unavailable due to a public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. Emergency paid sick leave covers employers with fewer than 500 employees and all employees, no matter how long the length of employment. Some exclusions may apply. The coronavirus situation is changing rapidly, as are the updates to various relief efforts. We'll continue to monitor the news and keep you updated as clarification is provided. Everyone, we encourage you to stay safe, practice proper social distancing, and count your blessings.